Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name is Mike, and I'm the programs director here at Africa Fire Mission. We're so happy that you took time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's training. Today, we're joined by Howard Cohen. Howard is our virtual training program coordinator, so he takes care of all the stuff behind the scenes to keep this operation up and running and bringing you this great content every week. But he's here today to do a teaching lesson where we're going to be talking about salvage and overhaul. So, what do we do after the incident? The fire's under control. Um, what do we do to save people's personal possessions the best we can and to make sure that we don't get called back? So we'll get into that in just a few moments here. But before we get started with our training, I'm going to pass things over to Jose, who's Africa Fire Mission's fire safety officer, and he's going to get us started with a couple words of encouragement.
Thanks, Mike. I truly appreciate you. And Howard, it is awesome having you on board and everybody who's here. Honestly, it's just a sacrifice of bundles and time for you to be here. In regards to today's topic, what came through my mind was a story in that was told a long time ago, about 2,000 years ago, of this guy who, on his way to a certain town, he found somebody who had been beaten by thugs on the road, and surprisingly, he wasn't the first person to actually get to see this person who's been hit. There were two people who had actually passed him, but for him, he refused to pass. He said to himself, "I cannot be able to pass this person because what if it was me?" So he actually took him and took him to the hospital and gave money to the doctor and told him, "Hey, if you need any more money, you can let me know and I will pay it." That showed care, that showed compassion, that showed love. And that's who we are as firefighters. When we go there and do salvage and overhaul, it's more like, is it really necessary? But if you look at it, when we are called back on scene, it means the person's property and items are burnt. So we care by actually doing the overhaul, the salvage, and to preserve memories and also dignities and future for those people. So never underestimate the power of your hands during overhaul. It goes a long way in making the people's minds have a closure. That's why heroes do their most work that is unseen. Thank you so much. Back to you, Chief Mike.
Thank you, Jose. We always appreciate you sharing those words of encouragement and all the work that you guys are doing out there to try to empower firefighters throughout all of Africa. Before we get started with today's training, a couple quick administrative notes. Check out your name there on the on your Zoom screen. Whatever name you've got showing there is the name that'll come on that certificate of attendance that you'll get. So if you want to make an adjustment to that, please do so. Speaking of that certificate of attendance, stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, and I'll get you that certificate of attendance. If for some reason your network goes out or you can't continue on, I encourage you to head over to our webpage, www.africafiremission.org. There's a resources tab you can find either at the top or the side, depending on the device that you're using. And under that resources tab, there'll be a section for training materials. That's where you can find a link to our Google Drive where you'll be able to find recordings of all of our trainings that we've done so far this year. If you watch the video, answer a couple questions to let me know that you've watched all of the training. I can get you a certificate of attendance for those as well. You could go back and do ones that you may have missed through the year if you're interested. So please check out that free resource that's available. When we get finished here at the top of the hour, we'll transition into our tea time, which is a time where you can ask more questions about today's class. And it's also a great opportunity to do some networking with other firefighters from throughout Africa. Take a look in the chat. You can see already we've got folks from Kenya, Malawi, Zambia, Ghana. If you're from somewhere else, drop it in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. Great opportunity to do some networking. That's enough out of me for today. Uh, I'm going to pass things over to my good friend Howard here to get us started with today's training.
Thanks, Mike, and Jose for that sweet story and your description of what I'm going to talk about. Well, I could probably pretty much covered it. Now there's a little bit more to it though. Um, Mike, have you made me a? Am I a co? Yeah, I guess I am a co-host. Okay.
Yep.
So let me get my screen set up for you guys. It's always a little tricky getting this screen box set up to the right size.
We got Philippines and Zimbabwe in the chat too.
Wow.
Excellent.
Well, welcome everybody. So glad you're here and really appreciate you spending your time to be with us. And I want to do my best to make sure you don't consider it not time well spent. Almost there. I wish there was an easier way to set this box up, and I think we're all set now. Okay. So, yes, so today, this is far and away the sexiest, most exciting topic in fire training. Yeah, I'm saying that obviously I'm joking. It's it's not where the glory comes from. You're not rescuing people and you're dramatically going into burning buildings. But salvage and overhaul is really important for a lot of reasons, which I'll cover. It's also surprisingly very dangerous and potentially some of the most dangerous work you'll do is when you're involved with overhaul. But we'll get into more of that as I go through the presentation. So firefighters have three goals, as you know. Our first and number one priority is to save lives. Lives of victims caught in the fire, but also saving our own lives. So we have to be careful, we have to be thoughtful about what we're doing. Our second objective is to control the fire, to get things so it doesn't spread, it doesn't cause more harm and more danger. And finally, our third is to protect property. Salvage and overhaul is all about number three, protecting property. So here's just another way to look at it in terms of the process. And we're going to first actually start talking about salvage, and then we'll get to overhaul. Salvage falls into the property conservation heading of our incident priorities. We have life safety, incident stabilization, property conservation. Those are our three primary objectives when we go to respond to an incident. So what salvage is that it's the art, and really it is an art because you have to really be thoughtful and creative in how you do it, of saving property. And what you're doing is you're minimizing the danger to not only the structure, but its contents. And this achieves our goal of saving lives and property. And the and property part is very important. You know, when you go in to a burning structure, and most of the time, most of the fires that we respond to are residential fires. That means that you're going into someone's home with their most prized possessions. The things that they have gathered, they've worked hard to buy and purchase. That stuff is very important to them. To you, it might just look like a chair, but to them, it might be a chair that was their great grandmother's. And so it's not just a chair, it's an object full of sentiment, full of emotion, full of memories. So we want to preserve that as much as possible. Now, when we get into this whole notion of salvage, we have to think about the way fires impact things. You have direct or primary impact. That's from the caused by the actual combustion process. So things are burning. There's fire, there's smoke, and there's heat. That's one aspect of that's happening that we want to protect the possessions and the structure as much as possible. Then there's the indirect or secondary, and that's caused by our efforts. And a lot of times the water or whatever we use to suppress the fire actually causes a fair amount of damage. It soaks the items in the structure. It damages the floor, damages carpets, and so we want to try to prevent as much of that as possible. The other area in which we create secondary damage is when you go into a structure and you want to open it up. You want to open up walls, pull down ceiling tiles, all those sorts of things in order to look for where there might be embers hiding so that you can prevent a secondary rekindling. So these are the different areas that we're focusing on when we're engaged with the salvage. So where do we begin? So first of all, the fire conditions have to be safe enough for you to be able to not just be focused on suppression. So, but you want to begin as much as you can on the fire floor or the floor below. The fire floor should be obvious because you want to limit any damage to the items that are on that floor, whether it's furniture, children's toys, books, anything like that. You want to do everything you can to keep them from not only becoming part of the content that's burning, but also to keep it safe as much as possible from your efforts to suppress the fire, namely trying to keep it dry. And why the floor below? Well, the floor below, where's your water going to go? If you go in and you're pouring water onto the content burning in a room, the water is going to have to go someplace. It's going to have to drain, and it's going to drain down. So you want to be aware of what's happening down below so you don't create more damage to things down there reduce the amount of damage that gets caused, because there's going to be damage caused. So, and then you also want to check, especially when you're working from the floor below, you want to check inside the ceilings because water is going to collect on there. You don't want to be inside on the floor below, and the next thing you know, the ceiling collapses because of the weight of water that has collected in there. So, but again, remember, the fire has to be generally under control before you start doing this. It doesn't have to be completely out, but it has to be safe enough to get in there to protect items. So when you're involved in the salvaging process, what you're doing is you're trying to make the items inside there as safe from water damage and smoke damage as you can. So one of the ways to do it, probably the best way to do that, is if you can't get it outside of the building, because you can sometimes, a couple of firefighters can grab a couch and carry it and put it on the outside, for example, or other items. But you want to gather things together and as much as possible into a big pile in a place more in the center of the room. We're going to talk a little bit more about what you do after you do that, but you can see how they've rolled up a carpet. It's on top of a table. Looks like a guitar that's added on top. There's some books, there's toys, all bunched together so that you can protect it as much as possible from water and smoke. Now, how are you going to protect it? You're going to use tarps. Now, I don't know on some of your, if you carry tarps on your apparatus, some of you may have these, you might not have them. You could use plastic, you could use really anything, ideally something that's waterproof that will cover it up. But I want to point out, notice how the arrow is pointing to these two couches back to back. They're doing this in order to create, when they put the tarp over there, it'll create something of a tent over over them. If they did it the other way, water would pool in the low spots. So the idea is they're creating a method for the water to drain off. Plus, they can stack books, toys, records, personal items in this space here, and even as it stacks up, then they could cover it with the tarp. So one of the main tools of the salvage process is tarps or something to cover the things up. So again, here's examples of the salvage process. It is in many respects pretty straightforward, pretty intuitive in most respects. If you can get stuff out of the burning structure, carry it out into a neat, safe pile. Now, in some of our fire districts, you might want to do that, but it might not, someone might have to actually keep guard over the stuff because there might be people who will say, hey, nobody's watching, I'm going to steal that. So that's something to think about if you're using, if your salvage method includes hauling stuff out. How do you make sure that it still stays safe when it's on the outside in a pile? Again, using tarps, whatever you have to cover it up. And here's a little trick, putting blocks underneath a piece of furniture. That lifts the chair up out of sitting, standing in the water, might preserve it from being damaged. So here's salvage covers. It's the most common, and in some ways most important salvage tool that you need to have on hand. You can throw them over things. You can tuck them under piles to protect from splashes. You could use plastic, whatever you can get a hold of. If your fire brigade's budget is limited, and you can't buy an expensive big tarp, I'd say go to a store, any kind of store that sells miscellaneous things, and buy yourself some plastic sheets. You can get them really inexpensively. The cheapest kind are the kind that painters use that are really thin plastic. It's probably a one-shot use, but it's cheap, but it'll do the job. So tarps are really important to get a hold of when you're focusing on salvaging. And by the way, besides the fact that you're protecting people's special possessions, salvage is a really important tool for developing good community relations. When people in the community see you showing care and concern for someone else's possessions, no matter how rickety or how poor quality it looks to you, but they see you showing care and concern, that goes to the whole story that Jose talked about with being compassionate and concerned for other people. So salvage is one of those things that has a lot of positive community impact. It's subtle, but it's real. So another thing to do with regards to salvaging is you can create these what are called water chutes. Again, you need to have tarps, but you can make them. You're creating a pathway for water to flow out of the structure. That could be very important depending on the floor of the structure you're working in. If it's a mud floor, you want to get water out of there if you can. If it's a person's got carpeting, you want to get water out if you can. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about tarps and just a little bit, and a little examples about how to make some. So look, we fight fires with water. There's going to be damage. But the damage from water we can mitigate or we can manage so it's not as bad as it would be. It could be. But we got to put the fire out and we got to use water to do that in almost every case. So we want to try and prevent water damage as much as possible. The first and most obvious way to do that, if we can, is to turn off a water supply. Now, that's not going to stop water for our use of water or prevent damage from that, but there might be a broken pipe that's causing water to flow. Some of your buildings, especially in your urban areas, might have sprinkler systems. Turn the sprinkler system off. Learn how to do that in the buildings that in your fire district that have those. Some other things that you could do are using water chutes, which we'll talk about in a little bit more. Floor mats, rubber mats to put on top of things. If you have them, water vacuums that'll suck up water, that could reduce water damage. Use of fans to push water around. That's another way to prevent water damage. And then finally, moving items to a safe place. That's really those are the 6 primary ways that you could do prevent water damage. I'm gonna show you a short video. Let me get it up and running. Okay. Hold on a second. We're gonna get it up. Here's this screen here.
Water chutes are used to route water using pike poles to create a high point.
Oh, hold on. Let me get it.
Firefighters start with pike poles and laying the salvage cover non-working side up. With 2 firefighters on one side, they'll roll the pike pole in towards the middle of the salvage cover. The salvage cover should be snug around the pike pole. They'll do the same on the opposite side with the same size or similar size pike pole. A 12-foot pike pole is recommended for the long side, but the length of the pike pole is variable based on the needed chute size and available pike pole size. Both ends will be rolled together and the salvage cover will be flipped. Now the working side is facing up. The firefighters will carry the chute to the desired location and then they'll open it. The hook end of the pike pole will be placed on the object to hold the chute up.
A second. I'm gonna stop the video.
Now, towards the middle of the set.
So that's a good example of how to make a water chute. Um, in my own firefighting experience in over 20 years, we only did that 1 or 2 times. That circumstance, it was needed or wanted in that circumstance. Many times we've covered items with the tarps, so that's really a useful tool. Probably making the chutes is probably more for show, in many respects, showing people how you can protect their stuff if you're doing demonstrations in your community. But having those tarps and being comfortable using them is very important. When I went through the fire training, we were actually part of our curriculum included and being tested on included how to properly fold the tarps according to standards and then how to deploy them. I know it seems kind of silly to say like, well, how do you fold them and but what we wanted to do is have tarps that we could just easily throw out on top of things. So that's the basics. I mean, salvage is pretty straightforward. It is what it is. It is not sexy, but at the end of the day, it's really important and really good. It gives your fire department a lot of a lot of credibility that shows you how you're concerned and can care about things. Okay, let's shift into overhaul. Now, overhaul is another one that's not as sexy in some respects, although overhaul can be fun. Overhaul, you get to open up walls, you get to pull down ceiling tiles, so it can be kind of fun if you're into the destruction side of the firefighting business. Some people are. We joke that firefighters are much better at taking apart buildings than they are putting them together. But overhaul is all about searching for embers, searching for hidden fires. You dump a lot of water on a fire and you think, okay, it looks like it's out. But as you all know, because I'm sure you've all sat in front of a campfire or a fire, a wood fire in the bush or in the field someplace, and you know that you could cover the coals and then uncover them and make the fire come back again. That's what rekindling is all about. Now, there is very little that's more embarrassing to a fire district or a fire brigade to have to get called back to a place that they thought was completely, cold, fire completely knocked out. I'm going to show you a short video about a rekindling and why it's so problematic, and I'll also I'm going to tell you a story that happened in my fire department a few years ago. So while I'm getting this video ready, I'll tell you what happened. So it was a Friday morning, and I was actually driving my daughter to school, and it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and we get a tone. There's a fire, and I happen to be very close to where the structure fire was, so I told my daughter to get out of the car, and you walked to school, and I went to the fire. So, yep, the rest of the fire department showed up. We put on our gear. We began to fight the fire. Turned out the fire belonged to someone who was in our fire department. And so after a considerable effort, we knocked down the fire, and all was well. And family was displaced, and we thought, okay, great. We saved the house. We're good. So we all went home. Next day, Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock, we get a tone for a fire. Wait a second. Isn't that the same place we were the day before? So sure enough, the house was on fire again. So this time we were all thinking to ourselves, how could it be? How could it have rekindled? We know we knocked it all down. Get back to the place and knock down the fire, put it out again. Only this time, actually, it wasn't a rekindle. It was an arson. The first time was an arson attempt that failed because we saved the fire, knocked down the fire. And so the guy went back to set the house on fire again because he wanted the insurance money. Wasn't exactly a rekindle, but you get the sense of like, there we are. It's like, how could this be? How could there be a rekindling? So let me show you this other video. Pull up my screen here for a second. This is about the
Upon arrival on scene for the first time, officials say they saw heavy black smoke coming from the front door. Multiple departments came in to help, making an aggressive attack to control the fire, which was eventually put out. Hours later, after 4 this morning, firefighters were once again called to the same home. This time, the fire was rekindled and was even worse, destroying what was left.
What we're thinking is that most homes these days are built with cellulose insulation, and cellulose is and it's insulation that is made out of paper and different other products and stuff like that, and it just sits there and smolders for a long period of time. So if you don't put copious amounts of water on it like that, it's going to just sit there, and you take the responsibility and the chance of the fact is that it may rekindle.
Upon arrival on scene for the first time, officials say they saw heavy black smoke coming from the front door. Multiple departments.
Okay. Get out of there. Go back to. So overhaul is all about making sure you don't have a rekindling. You want a definition? Overhaul is ensuring the fire is out and leaving the building as serviceable as possible. This minimizes the chances of rekindling. It's all about going in deep and making sure you don't leave anything in there that might reignite. So you have a lot of concerns and safety concerns when you're dealing with overhaul. First of all, is the building safe for you to be moving around inside? So you have to make sure that there's structural integrity. Things to think about when you're examining structural integrity are there heavy items on the roof that could fall through? Has the floors been weakened that would result in you falling through? What about the lighting? Can you actually see what's going on? Are the floors wet? Or probably for most of you, icy floors is not a condition, but for us, it often is. Number 6 is about poor air quality, and I'm going to come back to this one. I probably should have made it last so I can really hammer it, but I'm going to come back to that in a second. When you're doing overhaul, you should have a charged hand line on scene so that when you find little flare-ups or pockets of embers, you can knock them down. You also want to have a tool with you. A pike pole or an axe or something else so that you could be stirring and moving the ashes around to make sure that there's no sparks in there. If you're in a building that's had renovations, you want to look for spaces that have been covered over because there may be items back there that are, there might be stuff back there that's still smoldering. So you have to open up walls. You have to open up, get behind, get inside there. You're looking for, are there voids, empty spaces in the building? There might be, again, because of renovations or because of the way that it was structured. Are there places where you can't easily visibly see them, where there might be some fire still smoldering? And then fire extension. By that I mean, for example, let's say there's a piece of metal, a pipe of some sort, running from one wall into the next, through a void space into another space. In that other space, that pole might be conducting heat into that void space, and it might still be hot enough that it could actually heat up enough to cause reflaming and then a rekindling and then more fire. So you want to look for those kinds of extensions. If there's holes in the walls, fire might have gotten through those. Where there's electric outlets, light outlets, things like that. You want to be able to look inside, get behind there. So you really want to get into wherever you can't easily see from where you're, out from. You can't see behind, can't see into areas. You want to make sure there's nothing there. I want to go back to number 6, poor air quality. We know now that there's a lot of toxic chemicals in the air coming off of the area where you're doing your overhaul. There may not be flames, there may not be smoke, but that smoky smell, that burn smell, those are very, very harmful chemicals. So now we here in the West, we have very strong policies about you need to wear your BA when you're doing overhaul, because you know that the smoke and the heat when you're in the fire is dangerous, but you don't think about it when you're out there doing this overhaul. And when you're doing the overhaul, you're like, I'm hot. I want to take this gear off. It's cumbersome, but the air is really very, very dangerous. And so you really need to pay attention to that one when you're doing overhaul. So just a reminder, a single pocket of smoldering embers can cause a rekindling. When a rekindle happens, it is dangerous and it's time consuming and it's embarrassing. But keep in mind, overhaul is not just for structural fires. It's required for wildfires, it's required for cars, it's anytime there's a fire. Speaking of rekindling in cars, with electric vehicles now, if there's a fire or an electric vehicle is damaged, it has to be set far away from all other vehicles and things that could burn, because it could rekindle because of the process of the runaway that's happening within the battery. So overhaul is not just for structural fires. And let me just reemphasize, it's dangerous. And it's also time consuming if you're going to do it properly. So here's what you do. Here's what you're doing. You want to be identifying hot spots. You do that with your eyes. You do that you might have to take your glove off and feel if something still feels warm, but you want to identify hot spots. If your fire department, your fire brigade is fortunate enough to have thermal imaging cameras, otherwise known as TICs, use them because they'll find the hot spots for you. I recognize that they may not be readily available for many of your departments, but if you're able to get a hold of one, don't forget to use it. Overall, it's opening walls and ceilings, getting into the spaces that you can't see without removing something that's covering. Soak with water, stuff that's been burning. This is where you want to balance between your salvage and your overhaul. You want to make sure that you've really soaked that building. And as you know, just because you dump a lot of water on a fire doesn't mean that there still can't be embers that have been more or less sheltered from the water that you dumped on there by whatever's on top of it. Physically remove items if you can, making sure that they're not continuing, so they're not still holding heat within them and can't burn. Um, Anticipate extensions. That's what I was talking about, looking through um, outlets, things like that. Any holes in the walls where a pipe runs through. Did fire run in through there? Moldings, trims, baseboards, all those things they can have heat and embers stuck behind there. Move those away. And while you're doing this, the overhaul process can be happening while other parts of the building, the structure is still burning. So you want to move this stuff away from any other potential fire area. And check for anything that could hold heat. Like I said, metal before. So when and where do you do overhaul? Overhaul is done generally after the fire is under control, but the fire can be still burning in still being gotten under control in different parts of the building when you're doing overhaul in another part. So it's not only after sort of thing. And where do you do it? You're opening, like I said, any void space, walls, ceilings, floors, anywhere. Here are the kinds of tools that you want to use for overhaul, if you have them. Axes, shovels, pike poles, power saws, Halligan, Kelly tools, rubbish hook, wheelbarrows, carryalls. You might have different names for some of these things. I'm going to show you some pictures of what I'm talking about. But you could see this firefighter is using his pike pole to pull stuff down. Now, what's wrong with this picture is this guy is not wearing his BA, which is problematic because not only is the building still spewing toxic fumes, but also who knows what kind of crap is coming down when he pulls these tiles. But it's just the pictures that I found online, so I'm stuck with it. But so axes and pike poles and Halligan tools, and rubbish hooks, these things all help you open things up. Carryalls, shovels, wheelbarrows, these are for getting stuff out. You can shovel up embers and put them in the wheelbarrow and get them out of there. Things that are still smoldering, small items, you can put them in the wheelbarrow. Or carryall is just another way of carrying things. It could be a bucket. All different. So there's all tools to be able to open up the space. Overhaul is tiring, and if you're wearing your BA, all the more so, and it's a lot of work. So here's some of the tools. The names don't really matter, but the point is, you see, it's got pikes for poking into things, hooks for hanging onto things, different kind of handles. These are fiberglass handles. There's different kind of materials you could use for these things. You don't want to use metal because metal will conduct heat. Here's tools that's for raking things, prying, poking, again, prying. This is the Halligan tool. It's called that because that's the name of the guy who invented it. So when you're doing the overhaul, you want to use the right tool for the job. So if you need a tool to reach up, you want some sort of pole with a hook on it to pull things down. If you want to shovel stuff out, you need a shovel. Pretty obvious. Use the right tool for the job. Let me just add to that. Use the best tool that you have on your apparatus or available to use to do the job that needs to be done. And let your tool do the work. Go into some procedures now. Open the ceiling above the main floor where the fire is. Make sure there's no fire extension up in there. When possible, get ahead of traveling fire. If you know that fire is moving through a upper ceiling in a kind of a void space in a ceiling, go ahead of it and then pull down the tiles so that you can have access to it. We had a fire here some years back in a big school building, a college. It was college administration office, and it was big U-shaped. And fire started at one end, and it was crawling through the ceiling, and we were able to stop it by opening up the ceiling ahead of it, and then hitting it with water as it was approaching us in the crawl space. So example of just getting ahead of traveling fire. When you're looking for hidden fire, well, you're going to look for things like discolored paint, blistering paint, deep charring, smoke from around windows or doors, small sparks or cinders flying out. Um, and you're also looking for any openings that will allow for travel. So these are just some of the things you want to keep in mind when you're trying to find um, where fire might be hiding or lurking. Here's an example of firefighters pulling down ceilings. I assume that this firefighter is doing some supervising because you really want to have your gloves on when you do this. Here's an example of void spaces. You wouldn't, unless you ripped off these side pieces, you wouldn't know that hollow space was there. So you had to open that up in order to get at the fire, to get at fire, and also to get at what could potentially rekindle. And again, like I said, if you're fortunate enough to have access to a thermal imaging camera, some of you may use them. They're really, really valuable. You could save yourself a lot of effort and a lot of damage to a structure you've responded to. Now, but like I said, I realize they're expensive and they might be out of the range of your department's budget right now. I know a lot of small departments don't have them, even though they would love to have them. But if you can get one, get hold of it. That's the other useful tool for you. And that, friends, wraps up what I had to say about salvage and overhaul. Again, I just want to emphasize it's not a sexy part of the firefighting experience, but it's a really important for many, many reasons, including community relations, but also wear and tear, because the last thing you want to have to do is get called back to a fire because it rekindled, whatever kind of fire it is. So it shows due diligence on your part. It shows care and compassion, concern. Uh, it's really important. So if your chief says to you, "I want you to go do salvage work on this fire," don't think, "Oh no, how come I don't get to do the fun stuff?" Think of it as, I'm doing something that's really important. So, friends, I hope you found this interesting, useful. Again, this is our AFM information. Um, if you have a chance, if you have a phone and you want to scan that, you can get to our other information. Here's our websites and other info. And thank you very much for your time. And I will hand it back to Mike. We'll take any questions you have. If there's any in the chat, I'll be happy to entertain them. Or Mike, or anybody else with fire experience who wants to talk about overhaul their experience with it, can do so as well.
All right, thank you, Howard. We're going to open the floor up to any questions that you may have. A couple ways that you can ask a question. You can type a question into the chat. You can use the raise hand feature, or you could just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. So the floor is open. If anyone's got any questions or comments on today's training.
I'd also encourage you to share any experience you've had either doing salvage, overhaul, and or rekindling.
I'll start with the sharing part. Coming from um, previously working in a pretty small and rural fire department, there were a lot of times when you got called to the fire and there wasn't much you could do, right? The fire had a pretty big head start on you. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys can relate to that, because I know you've got issues of people calling you late and things like that. So, by the time you get there, it's not that you're not getting a quick extinguishment of the fire, right? And so when we would get to a place where we would pretty much lose the whole house, right? We would spend even more time than usual doing the salvage portion of it then, right? So the fire's out and you know, there's probably still some stuff in there that you might be able to save. You might be able to find a photo album or some kind of paperwork that might be necessary for them or whatever. We would spend more time at those fires digging through the stuff. The people want to dig through what's left and try to find what they can, but it's dangerous for them. There's the danger of being cut and the stuff is there's still hot embers and things like that. So we would spend more time, especially on those incidents where you lost a lot of stuff, we'd spend more time trying to help those people get whatever they could out of it. It was sort of like the only thing we had left to offer, right? So it's just, Howard said it a couple times in his presentation that this is a way to build that community awareness or build that rapport, I guess, with the community. Um, so just something to think about. We always use that as a tool. It's like, sorry, we couldn't stop your house from burning down. The least we can do is at least dig what's left out. That leads us right into a question that was dropped into the chat of, it says furniture can be moved out of the building. How do you ensure that you don't disturb possible evidence for fire investigations?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for bringing it up because I should have mentioned that. Um, it's a delicate balance between preserving evidence for fire investigation and engaging in salvage and overhaul. Um, you want to try and be very conscious of what you take apart with regards to your overhaul efforts, and at the same time as you're moving things around, you want to be very aware of what you do, what you move. Some things that you could do are during the overhaul and stage, if it's feasible, you can take pictures of what you find so that as you move things, you could show the pictures and say, this is what we found in this location. Um, and but we moved it because we needed to get behind it in order to check for, fire extension. So you create as much evidence of what's there that you can show a fire investigator can use, because no one piece is gonna, be the, sort of be the one thing that makes it, defines if it was an arson or not. So it's gonna be a series of pieces they put together. But for example, if you see a gas can lying on its side or a fuel can, you know, but you want to get it out of there because you don't want it to reignite or to catch fire, make a note of it, take a picture or write down, I found, propane tank, next to the stove, moved it for safety purposes, but that's where we found it. So that information is intact. But it's a great question, and the bottom line, it's a balance between what you have to move, what you have to protect, and leaving things intact for fire investigation. Thanks for asking it.
I think it also sort of depends on your individual fire brigade policy, but like, sometimes the cause of the fire is very obvious, right? You arrive and you put the fire out and you start to talk to the owner and they say, well, I was cooking and I spilled oil and it caught fire. And you go to and you're at the kitchen area and all signs are pointing to that being, the point of origin, highest degree of damage and things like that. You know, Not every fire needs, and of course it has to go by your individual fire brigade policy, but not every fire needs a thorough investigation. If there's an obvious cause, they tell you this is what started the fire, and it's clear that they're being forthright, they're being honest with you about it. In those circumstances, you don't have to worry so much about preserving that evidence. We always try to hammer that in, like, don't disturb the point of origin. But that's right. That's until you know the cause, and if the cause is obvious, right? Like you can document it, cooking fire, they'll still be able to make their insurance claims and things if they have it. So don't over focus on the investigation portion too, that prevents you from doing that salvage and overhaul we talked about. Another question in the chat asks, do we have the stats that have an estimate of how many firefighters have died as the result of salvage and overhaul due to cancer?
You know, the short answer to that question is no. There is no stat for that particular thing. In the United States, we have a service that's tracking cancer and cancer deaths among first responders, but it's impossible to zero it down to where was the exposure, because anytime you're at any kind of fire experience, you're exposed to hydrogen cyanide and a gazillion other toxic chemicals. So whether no firefighter only does overhaul, so there's no way to be able to say that the overhaul crew has a higher rate of cancer than the engine crew. It's generally, it's just the overall thing. I mean, it's also really hard to make a direct connection between the causes of cancer and cancer. It takes a lot of cases and a lot of dots being connected to create the data. And for one area, for example, where that has been really, it's been really had a big impact on fire service is that the PPE that we have been wearing for decades is filled with a chemical to make them flame retardant. Unfortunately, that same chemical is carcinogenic. And it took a tremendous amount of effort for some folks to convince people that there's a relationship between the PPE and a particular kind of cancer. And as a result of that, we're now seeing PPE being produced without this carcinogenic element component to it. So, but it's a great question, but it's impossible to pinpoint an answer for that.
Cancer's always coming for us on this job, so do everything you can to avoid exposure. Good personal hygiene, clean your gear, clean yourself, wear your BA as often as you can, don't breathe smoke. Just take care of yourself, Other questions or
Hello, sir.
comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, sir, I am Ali Raja from Pakistan, currently working in Saudi Arabia. Last year, 2024, I requested for the training session as a fire dispatcher training. And you said you will arrange in 2025, but I did not see it ever yet.
We're working on it. We've got to find a good instructor and a location for that topic, but we've got it. You're still on our radar for sure.
Okay. I hope so. Next year, inshallah, you will arrange.
Other questions about today's training before we wrap up sort of the formal portion of our training here. Keep the floor open for just a few more moments before we wrap things up and move into our tea time. Alrighty then. Let me wrap things up with a thank you to Howard for coming and joining us for today's training, leading that session. It's much appreciated, as well as everything else you do to keep this running in the background with arranging for instructors and making sure that we're staying on task here. So thank you, Howard, and thank you to you all for taking the time out of your schedules, using your bundles to attend this training, to try to better yourself, better your skills, so that you can better serve your community. It's such an admirable thing, and we don't take any of you for granted. If you think that there's somebody else that may benefit from this training, please feel free to invite them. They can share your screen if you want to save on some bundles, or you can share that registration link with them. We've got plenty of seats here in the classroom, so don't be afraid to invite others. Share the knowledge that you've gained here. Be sure you're going back to your fire brigades and sharing what you've learned here. Practice what you've learned here. See if you can find some sort of salvage materials, tarps, plastic, something like that, and just practice. How do you quickly and efficiently deploy that to help preserve property? Great quick drill. Okay, so something you can work on within your stations. That's all for this week's session. We're going to sign off here and move into our tea time. Thanks everybody for coming, and I hope to see you all again next week.